Hello, today we'd like to talk about the four exiles which the Jewish people experience, see their roots in the Torah, and will hopefully this will lead us to give us a nice template, a nice background to understanding the festival of Hanukkah, which we're in now, which will make a separate lecture for. Okay, so let's start off. What are the four exiles? So if we have a look in the four exiles that are alluded to many times throughout the Torah, we'll focus just on this one, just for brevity's sake, because I tend to go on for quite a long time, and I want to keep this as short as I can and concise, so you get the picture without being bogged down with too much droning on. Okay, so let's have a look. So this is in Genesis. If you want other sources, you look in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, you'll see four terms of darkness there. But here we're talking about when Hashem, God, makes his covenant with Abraham in chapter, 15, in Genesis, Parshas Lech Lecha, right? And it says here, Vahi Shemesh Lovoi, and part of the process was cutting up animals and passing through them. That's how they did the covenant. That's a method of doing a covenant between two parties, apparently. So that's what that was. And then it says, "Vahi Hashem shlovoi v'sardo imo noflo al Avram b'nei emo chashecha k'doi lo nofeles olov." And the sun was going down, and a deep sleep fell on Avram, and behold, emo means awe or fright. Chashecha, darkness. Gedoilo means great, so Chashech Gedol is a great darkness. The Feles Love was falling on him, right? And this we see in Rashi. So this in this sort of like beige, I think this is beige. This is actually the commentary of Rashi, and he says here, "V'nei emo remembers the tzoros u'choshech shel Goliath." This is an allusion to the darkness of the exiles. So basically, God was telling him that there's going to be four exiles, but actually, Vayom Avram, you look at the next verse, it says, "You should know that your seed should be strangers, Beretz lo lohem, in land which is not theirs, V'avodum, and they will serve them, V'inu osom, and these people who they're in the land of will afflict them 400 years." And also the nation which they serve I will judge, and then they'll go out with great wealth. And Rashi actually points out here, so it's interesting here. So we had the allusion, the Midrash says this refers, Rashi actually brings the Bereshis Rabbah, right, and a few other sources, right, that this verse, God's actually telling him, I'm going to make a covenant with you, but you should know you're going to have a hard time. Your descendants are going to go into different exiles and are going to suffer there, right? And there's especially going to be one exile, which is going to be sort of like the worst, well, it seems to be the worst of the lot, but we'll discuss that, is the Egyptian exile, where they were literally slaves, where they didn't have any autonomy at all over their basic lives. They're basically hard slave labor for 400 years. Well, it actually ended up being shorter than that, but they were basically the exile started 400 years before, but they actually, Rashi actually explains the calculation here, right? So God's telling Avram that his descendants will be in an exile in Egypt, essentially, and then he says, "V'gam," and also the nation which they serve, I will judge. What does it mean? And also, right? So in the Torah, we've got the concept of drush, of exegesis. That means you take a word which is out of place, and you try understanding what it's referring to. There's different rules how to do this process. But over here, keeping it simple, v'gam, and also the nation. It could have just said, the nation which they will serve, I will judge, referring to Egypt. But why did it say v'gam esago, and also the nation? That means not just Egypt, not just something else, but also Egypt, What's that something else? Yeah, so this gum and also is actually including, Rashi says, the Rabbis Daled Malchus. It's including the 4 kingdoms, right? The 4 exiles which the Jewish people had. That's what we refer to as the Daled Golios or the Daled Malchios, the 4 exiles or the 4 kingdoms. So look at Rashi, actually, the translator, it doesn't say this in the Hebrew, but they're nice enough to put in brackets the 4 exiles for us, the 4 kingdoms. Who are we talking about? Babylon, right? That's the Babylonian Empire from, there's 2 Babylonian empires. We're talking about the later one, the one which of Nebuchadnezzar. We're not talking about the very early one, which was Hammurabi, I think. That was much, much earlier. The Babylonian Empire, so this is talking about 2,500 years ago, was the Babylonian Empire, according to the Jewish way of calculating it. It's about 200 years discrepancy between the Jewish way and other people, other historians. There's a whole discussion where they went wrong. They're making certain assumptions, but we've got exact dates for everything. So yeah, there you go. Right. The second one is the Persian and Median exile. That's the Persian Empire. That's Xerxes and Darius and Cyrus. Yeah. So there's the great sort of Persian Empire, which is around that time as well, shortly after the Babylonian. They're the ones who destroyed the Babylonian Empire. They took it over. And the exile, as opposed to the Babylonian Empire, which actually destroyed the temple, the Jewish people still didn't have a temple in the time of the Median Empire. It was actually the threat of extinction, which it was the unique aspect of the Persian exile. There's a man called Haman who is the viceroy or the prime minister of Persia. He was the second commander of the country. He convinced Achashverosh, I think people can translate that as Xerxes. This is all in the book of Esther in the Tanakh, to destroy the Jewish people, and the Jewish people repented, and they got a miraculous salvation through Esther, and a whole story there, an amazing story. And the festival of Purim is based on this salvation. The Jewish people were saved from physical extinction. That is the Persian and Median one. So let's carry on. So now we've got the Greece, the third one, and that's the Hanukkah story. So hopefully we'll be doing a separate talk about the Greek Empire and how they oppressed the Jewish people. Now their one was also, again, each one was a bit qualitatively different from the others. Each one had their own character. The Babylonian ones, they destroyed the temple. So our spiritual connection with God was damaged by them. The Persian one was a threat to our physical existence. Then you have the Greek Empire. That's Alexander the Great, and later on by his 4 generals. One of them was Antiochus, who was tasked with looking after Judeans and basically what we call the Eretz Yisrael, the Jewish lands, because the Greek Empire spanned the world. They're split into 4 parts. For the 4 generals of Alexander after he died, he only lived till I think 32 or something. Amazing man. Just obviously, God wanted him gave power to the Greek Empire to spread across the whole world. Right? Part of the blessing to his ancestor Yefes. You have to look him the Yefes. One of the blessings Noach gave to his son Yefes, who will be expansive. So yeah, so we see that the Greeks indeed spanned the world, and so did Persia. Those are 2 empires which literally encapsulated the whole known world, more or less. Right? What did the Greeks do? They didn't destroy the temple. We had the temple. It was ready in the Second Temple period, about 2,300 years ago. So they didn't want to destroy the temple like the Babylonians. They didn't want to kill the Jewish people either. They weren't trying to eliminate us like in the Persian Empire story. The third one was the Greek Empire was a spiritual battle, which we'll speak about hopefully in the next lecture. The idea of Greek philosophy, they had a battle of minds and philosophies with the Jewish people, and obviously they were trying to force the Jews to give up their spiritual way of looking at the world and make it sort of a naturalistic, based purely on science without having any spiritual input. Now let's go back to the verse again. We see the last one is Edom. Okay, Edom, that is one of the names of one of the children of Isaac. Isaac had two children. He had Yaakov and Esau, Jacob and Esau. Obviously, Jacob is the ancestor of all Jewish people, right? Well, besides the converts, but he's the final patriarch where all his children are basically Jewish now. The Jewish nation, they're called Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, because the name of Jacob was Israel. In the story where he, in Genesis 32, 33, something like that, where he had the fight with the angel, and then he gave him a new name, which was Israel. Right, the arch nemesis of Jacob was his twin brother Esau. They were meant to be working together ideally. Jacob was meant to be the spiritual one, the one who was studying, bringing the spiritual element into the world, and Esau was meant to be the one coming out into the physical world to make the physical world a nice inhabitable place where the spiritual connection with God could be made into. Yeah, so we spoke about this at length when we spoke about the three patriarchs, so I'm not going to go through that again. But Edom, Esau, his descendants were basically the founders of Rome, and eventually Rome, we got the Roman Empire, and then eventually the Roman religion, which is Christianity, and so that's how the influence of Esau persists till today, because really Italy and Rome is not so powerful in that respect as a nation which is oppressing the Jewish people now. It's really the Vatican City, which is in Rome, which is the real source of the Jewish people's problems, which, as we see for the last 2,000 years, the main persecutions for the Jewish people have been in the name of Christianity. Just look at the history. Every few years, a pogrom, crusade, a blood libel. There's been something going on from the Christian nations in the name of their religion, right? To fight against the Jewish people, to have an excuse to kill them, to persecute them. So this is all the exile which we're in now, and of course they were also the ones who destroyed the Second Temple in the year 70 CE. So these are the four exiles, right? So we understand that the Babylonian one was a short time, 70 years. The Persian one was only about 52 years, I think. The Greek one was longer, it was 180 years, and the Edomite one, the Golos Edom, has been close to 2,000 years now. Yeah, we see in the Midrash speaks about Jacob and the ladder. He saw different angels going up and down, and the Midrash says that these actually correspond to the four exiles. So one angel of Babylon went up 70 rungs, then he came down, and then the one of Persia, 52 rungs, he came down, representing the number of years, and then the Greek one went 180 rungs, representing the 180 years of that exile. Then they came down. Then they saw the one of Edom, and it was going up, 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 up. And Jacob was getting terrified. What's going on? He just keeps going. He's not coming down. And he's gone up thousands of steps. Well, we know in hindsight now that what he saw must have been thousands of steps, because we're still in that exile now. So, and then we bring the verse in Obadiah, which speaks about which speaks about Esau, if you make yourself as high as the eagle, and you put your nest amongst the stars. Maybe it's hinting to the idea of space travel. Interesting, which was by the children of Esau, America and Russia. Also Russia, another branch of Christianity there. They go up to the stars. I'll take you down from there. So God says, you think you're going to be, so powerful, you're going to master everything? Echoes of the Tower of Babel there, right? Thinking that you're going to be the defining the reality of this world that we spoke about in one of our previous lectures. And I'll take you down from there. And that's the idea of the Jewish people in exile in Edom. And if you look at the main places which we've been, they've all been in places which have been Christian countries. There is, however, if you look at the dream of Daniel, we see different animals representing these 4 exiles. But there seems to be like an extra one at the end of the 4th exile, which is the beast with lots of horns. I think that's how it goes. Can't remember. It's been a while since I saw the verses there. There's an extra one which actually represents the exile of Yishmael, which is actually the brother of Isaac. So it's interesting that these two final exiles of Esau and Yishmael are actually the 2 brothers of 2 of the patriarchs. Isaac's brother was Yishmael. We spoke about this at length. What's the battle between them? The battle of ideologies between the good form of kindness, which is restraint, and the bad form of kindness, which is boundless kindness, but there's no rules, there's no structure, there's no discipline. That's Yishmael. And that's the exile which is meant to take place at the end of the Edomite exile. And that's the one which it seems very clear that we're living through that now. At least the last 60, 70 years, we've had lots of problems from the Arab nations, especially what's going on with the terrorists and things like that at the moment. Seems pretty clear that we're living through that last 11th horn, if I remember correctly, which is that exile of Yishmael, of the Arabs. And of course, by extension, it's Islam, the religion. Just like with Edom, it's not just the nation of Italy or Rome, it's actually the ideology which comes out from that, which is Christianity. So, and Esau was a brother of Jacob, Esau was the negative aspect of the idea of discipline, whereas Jacob was the correct form of discipline, which is mercy. We explained this at length in that lecture, which speaks about the patriarchs there. Exactly what was the dynamics between all these different ideologies. So this is the longest one of the lot. So it's very strange why there's such a discrepancy in the lengths of the exiles. What's going on here? Right? And why does there have to be 4? What's the significance of these 4? Right? And we see the numbers repeated over and over and over again throughout the whole Torah. Yeah, the second verse in Genesis, the chapter 15 in Genesis we just spoke about. It speaks about when by the burning bush in Exodus, I think chapter 5 or something like that, chapter 4 maybe, right, with the stories of burning bush, right. Rashi there again, it says that the name of when Moshe asked God what his name is, Eke Asher Eke, I will be that I will be, right, and it's referring to one Eke, I shall be, referring to I will be with the Jewish people in this exile, Asher Eke, and I will be with them in the other exile. So we get an allusion to the 4 exiles there as well. And then in Kosai again in chapter 26 in Leviticus, I think it is, right? It speaks about the terrible tragedies which will become, which will befall the Jewish people when they don't go in Hashem's ways, in His statutes. And it says after these terrible curses and admonitions, it says, and even so, if when they're in the land of the exile the tormentors, the lo mastim, I will not despise them, lo galtim, I will not purge them, lo gatim, lo mastim, lo gatim, chalosom, to annihilate them, lo febrisiatom, to annul my covenant with them, which is actually referring to the fourth exile of Edom. The annulment of the covenant, not like the Christians say, the idea of the New Testament, that God annulled his covenant. We see clearly in that verse that God will not annul his covenant with us, despite the fact that we rebelled and we were in the exiles as a punishment. And then you've got the dreams of Daniel, etc., etc. You see these four coming all the time. It's a very, very prominent theme in the whole of the Torah and the Tanakh. The idea of the four exiles. Now, so what is the roots? What are the spiritual roots of the four exiles? So the idea is that we spoke about there's three souls to human beings. You've got the mind, the emotions, and the physical aspect of the human being, right? We say that's associated. The physical aspect is associated with desire to procreate and to survive, which is like eating, nourishment. The emotional one is that we spoke about when we spoke about the three souls. It's the one which it's me, autonomy, right? It's the bridge between the physical and the spiritual. Spiritual being the mind, which is the intellect. That's the spiritual soul. You've got the spiritual soul, emotional one, physical one, neshama, ruach, nefesh. There's actually a fourth one which we didn't speak about, which is called the spiritual soul, right? So you think about the mind, the neshama, as the intellectual one, the one which is able to think of abstract thought. Then you've got one which has got the ability to actually connect and experience spirituality and have a direct connection with God. So the Jewish people, this is explaining how a regular human being is set up, right? The Jewish people are called, many times they're called Odomatem. You are called Odom, you are called a man. And Odom is actually the name of the first man, Adam. So the rabbis describe this concept that the Jewish people, after the sin of Adam, his soul got split up into many parts, to many sparks, and each one of them falls into each one becomes a soul for an individual Jew. So I would have one spark, another Jew would have a different spark. That's the general idea, without going into specifics. They say each one represents one of the letters of the Torah. That's the intimate connection between the Jews and the Torah. And of course, Torah is the blueprint, or the building blocks of which God uses to project his godliness into the world. That's the idea of the Jewish people are meant to be the sort of the ones who bring God's light into the world. It's our job. That's who we are. Right? Whereas the non-Jews are meant to be the ones who take that light and enrich the physical world with it. So that's the idea of the partnership. We spoke about that in the lecture of duality. Yep. Right, and then the whole of mankind's meant to eventually come together, connect Jews, non-Jews, and whole of mankind with God, and we're all connected together and connected with the physical world, so everything becomes connected with God, one with God. That's the purpose of creation, right? Why is the Jews and not the whole of mankind? That's a different discussion. That's to do with the sin of Adam, which we might speak about in another time. Okay, so we have these four different souls. Now let's have a look. Interesting. Let's have a look at one more source of the four exiles. It's very interesting. The Midrash brings this idea when speaking about there's four non-kosher animals which have one sign of kosherness, of which purity. I don't know what the right word is. So this is found in chapter 11 in Leviticus, I think. Yep, that's it. Right. So let's have a look. Right at the beginning. I wonder if Rashi speaks about this. No, it doesn't speak about the Medrash. It doesn't speak about this Medrash. Okay, fine. Okay, so chapter 11 goes like this. Speak to the Jewish people. This is the wild animals or the creatures which you may eat. This is where the Jewish people get the commandments of what's a kosher animal, what's a not kosher animal, and all other types of species, birds, fish, etc. These are the animals which you may eat from all the animals which are on the world, which are on the earth. Kol mafreses pasta, anything which has split hooves, and they're absolutely split. That means they're not joined slightly at the bottom. Malaske roba behemo, and it also chews the cud in animals. Oisoto chelu, you may eat it. Okay. But this you may not eat. So the question is, why do you need to? That's pretty straightforward. There's two conditions to eat to kosher animal: split hooves and chewing the cud. So obviously, if they don't have one of those signs, it's not kosher. But still, the Torah speaks it out anyway. And it says, but this you may not eat from the things which do chew the cud, and have split hooves. That means there are four exceptions to the rule now. There are four animals in existence, or four categories of animals, four species, which only have one of the two signs. All animals either have both signs or they have neither signs. There's no other animals. There are no animals which have only one sign besides these four. Okay, which is an amazing. This in itself is actually used as a proof for the divinity of the Torah itself. The fact that the Torah can make such a categorical statement that there is literally only four types of animals which either have split hooves or chew the cud. One, but not the other. And actually, in Jewish law, it's based on this. There are actually laws based on if you see an animal and you know it's not one of these animals, and you can see it's got split hooves, but you can't tell if it has chews the cud, then you can assume it's kosher, right? Because there aren't any other animals besides these listed here which only have one of the two signs. Okay, so let's have a look. So Esa Gomol, the Gomol, camel, it's very similar to the Hebrew and the English there. Gomol is a camel. Kimale Gerohu, because it chews the cud, but it doesn't have split hooves. Vesa Shofon, Vesa Neves, again, both of these chew the cud, but don't have split hooves. Vesa Chazir, but the pig, Kimafris Parsahu, this is unique. The pig is a unique animal. It's the only one which has split hooves. V'shesa parsa is a fully split hooves. But it's got the other problem. It doesn't chew the cud. It's impure for you. That means it's impure in the terms of forbidden to eat. Okay. Right. So you've got to be careful with this word tome. Impure is it's just a practical translation. It's the easiest way to translate it. It doesn't mean it's impure, because actually there is a concept of purity and impurity, and it's actually very different from these animals. Okay, we're not going into that. So we see that these four animals. The Medrash actually speaks about these four animals correspond to the four exiles. Right? It speaks about the first three, which are the Babylonian, Persian, and the Greek exile, and they all have this aspect of chewing the cud, but they don't have the split hooves. Whereas the fourth one, the EDOM, which is the pig has split hooves, right? But I shouldn't do that, should I? Right, it has the split hooves, but it doesn't chew the cud. So what's the idea there? How do you see this? And the Medrash goes on. It speaks about each one of these exiles, the Jewish people, right, or the exiles themselves. They praised God, but even though they had these these faults in them, they still praised God. Whereas when it came to Edom, it was pretty bad. It was like Edom is the worst of the lot, because it has the external trappings of goodness, but the internals are not there. So let's have a look at this in a bit more detail. So what's the idea of the split hooves and the chewing the cud? Without going into the details, the general idea is that when you look at the animal, what do you see? Does it look like a kosher animal? If you have a look at the way camels eat, it's very interesting. They go like that, right? You can see they're showing off. Look at me eating, right? And they chew the cud. Because they're trying to tell you that, we're kosher, we chew the cud, we're good, right? Our internal is good. The internal aspect of who we are is actually good. It's kosher, if you want to say it. But when a camel sits down, you can't see its legs. It sort of it buckles its legs down and it sits on its legs, sort of like kneeling, sort of. And you can't see the fact that it doesn't have split hooves. So God imbued in the animals this sort of instinct to hide their negative side. And the same with the rabbit and the hyrax, whatever the third animal is. That's a controversial one. There are a few different opinions what the third animal actually is. The Aranevas, polecat I heard as well. But those three animals, both have positive internal realities, but their external is tainted. Whereas Edom, if you look at a pig, when it eats, its face is right in the food. You can't see what's going on there. But the feet, it sticks out. It actually sits down with its legs stretched out so you can actually see the split hooves. What's the idea? The idea is that Edom wants to say that, look, our internal, you might not be able to see it, but look how kosher we are. Look. We look holy. We look like we're very spiritual. We're very good. We've got split hooves. The externals look very good. It's the internals which are the problem. So let's have a look at exactly what's going on here in terms of the four exiles. And we'll see the idea of the four souls, and we'll understand why Edom, the fourth exile, is so much longer than the other ones. So a very good book which explains this idea based on the Jewish teachings, obviously, but puts it together very nicely. It's called Jewish Self by Jeremy Kagan. So look out for that. If you've got spare money, you buy his book. It's really good. It's a very abstract book, but if you're good with English, you get amazing stuff out of it. So the idea is the Jewish people are one big soul. We've got these four souls. The problem is, because of the Adam eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, there was something, he created damage corresponding to these four souls. Okay, there's a discussion in the Talmud, in the Gemara, what exactly was the tree which Adam ate from. Was it figs, grapes, was it wheat, according to one opinion? And the Medrash actually has a fourth opinion, was an esrog, a citron, right? That actually corresponds to the four problems, the four souls which were affected by the sin of Adam. We might get into that if we make a lecture about the sin of Adam. Again, there's so much to talk about when speaking about any of these fundamental ideas, so I have to stay on track here. So the four exiles actually are ways to bring out the problems in the Jewish soul, each one of the souls, and to fix it. So we'll start with Babylon. Babylon corresponds to the ruach, the emotions, right? Why it starts in that order, I'm not sure. It's the idea of the autonomous self, the idea of arrogance. The temple is a place which connects the physical world with the spiritual world. Babylon was the one which destroyed it, right? The Babylonians were into idolatry more than any of the other exiles. It's the idea of making a different connection, destroying the real connection between us and God and making a new connection. This idea of arrogance. So no, I want to define my my destiny. The idea of the autonomous self in opposition to God, right? Right, that's, and because this is slightly spiritual, it was not the shortest of the exiles, because the emotions are actually quite significant. Eventually, a person can work on his a person which has corruption in his heart. You can deal with it. It's fixable. Then we go on to the Persian exile. That corresponds to the physical side. We know that the Persians are a very physical nation. They're very, very strong, powerful, sort of like a significant nation physically, right? I think to remember the world weightlifting champion might have been Iranian, which is Persia basically. I don't remember where I remember that from. Yeah, they're a very strong nation. They were a very terrifying nation. We had the immortals. They were called soldiers, which put fear into people. They're very intimidating type of people, right? So they're very connected with the physical, right? They're just, the physical side is just intimidating, big. They used to eat a lot. They used to indulge in pleasures. We saw in the Purim story in the book of Esther, what were the Jewish problems? What was the problem with the Jewish people there? Is that they had benefit from the feast of Achashverosh, and they shouldn't have. So you see that brought out the problem, the thing which is wrong in the Jewish people. In that generation, it was bringing out the idea of physical desire and lust, basically. And that corresponds to the lowest of the four souls, which is the physical one, the one which wants us to just survive, which is food and to procreate. Right? So that's the idea of physical desire. And the Jewish people, how did they fix that? So, okay. So what they did is they fasted. They fasted for 3 days and they repented. But the idea of the fasting is, we see where our problem is now. This aspect of Adam's sin, which we've inherited, is the idea of attachment to physicality for the sake of enjoying the physicality, hedonism. So we've got to temper that by fasting, and they fixed it. And once that got fixed, then physicality can be used for a holy purpose, which is why, paradoxically, the Purim is the festival where we get completely drunk and we have a nice physical time. We have big parties, festivals, a feast, whatever, right? Because that shows the idea that we've fixed this aspect of the Jewish soul, which is the physical, the nefesh, the lowest one. That's Persia. Okay. Then we go on to the Greeks. I don't want to give too much away, or I'll spoil my next lecture. But the idea of the Greek is the intellect, the mind. And we can all recognize this if people know history. Greek philosophy, science, the concept of science, idea of empirical, to an extent, empirical way of looking at the world. The idea of the beauty of man. It's not physical, lustful beauty, like the Persians might have done. Yeah, this is sort of like a more aesthetic. The idea of like even the statues, the Greek statues, and all the amazing sort of like temples and things like that. Immense aesthetic beauty. The idea of the greatness of man's mind, the Olympic Games, the idea of Hellenism, the idea that the human body, the human mind is something beautiful to be marveled at. Right? Philosophy, that's the mind. So the Jewish people in that time, the many Hellenists who went along with that. So we saw the Jewish leaders understood, well, we see the new problem now. Now we see the eating from the tree of knowledge created a problem in the neshama, in the brain soul of the Jewish people, which is the intellect, the desire to have philosophy for the sake of philosophy, nice ideas, but they're not going anywhere. They're just nice to. I heard from Rabbi David Gottlieb. Very interesting. Apparently, if you do a philosophy, this surprised me quite a lot because coming from the Talmudic studies, we're very, very different from this. Apparently, in a philosophy degree, the focus is more on the question rather than the answer, right? As they come up with I've got an interesting question. Let's think about this. Oh, yeah, really interesting. So, like in Judaism, okay, so let's try getting the answer because, you've got to go somewhere. We want to be understanding the world more. But they're more interested in the question itself. Very strange. So I'm just saying what I heard. So this is the idea of Greek philosophy, which filters down to modern society. The idea of questioning, sort of like the inquisitive mind, and the Jewish people were having that sort of, the mind took over, and it forgot there's something above. There's a connection with God, which is meant to be guiding all of this. So even though naturally, out of the three souls, the mind is generally the good one, but even the mind can be corrupted. Now, when the mind gets corrupted, that is a very serious problem. Because if a person's philosophy is corrupted, it's really hard to change that. So you have to dig so deep into who you are. Like, we're meant to be connected with God. Our job is to bring God into the world. And why am I wasting my time with philosophizing about all these different things? That takes much more effort to fix. So now we understand why the length of the first three exiles were the lengths they were. When it comes to physicality, there's only so much cake you can eat. And believe me, I know. Right, there's only so much you can eat. And once you have too much, you just vomit it up. There's a limit to physical desires and lust. So therefore, that was the shortest of the exiles. The physical one is only 52 years. That's the Persian exile. Then you have the emotional one, which is quasi-spiritual. The emotions are not physical. They're connected with the physical, right? They have a direct bearing on how you feel physically in the body. In fact, the heart is in the body part of the human, right? But it's got this element of spirituality as it's something which is not to do with the actual upkeep of the body. It's emotions. It's the idea of drive. So that takes 70 years. That's a Babylonian exile. For the Jewish people, it took 70 years to fix that one. When it comes to the Greek exile, 180 years. Because when the intellect gets corrupted, then you're in big, big trouble. Right. Now, the question is, so what is the Edomite exile? What is the fourth exile? What's going on? We spoke about the Persian exiles, too much physical desire, too much autonomy, too much arrogance, too much me. That's a Babylonian exile. Too much intellect for the sake of being intellectual and just inquisitive for the sake of it without going on to anything more meaningful. That's a Greek exile. So too much physical, too much emotional, too much mental. How can you have too much spiritual? How can you have too much of a connection with God? That doesn't make any sense. But remember the four animals. The first three animals correspond to these three exiles. What was their problem? The problem wasn't in the internal, the problem was in the external. They didn't have the split hooves. But they chewed the cud. That means deep down, they had the right way of looking at the world deep down. They knew about the internal, the chewing the cud, the connection with God, the internal, the panemiistic, I'm so bad with translations. The deeper, the more hidden aspect of who we are, which is our connection with God. They had that. The problem was when we've got that desire to connect to God, but then we have something fighting from below. We have intellect fighting that. We have emotions fighting. We have the physical desires fighting it. Then you've got a battle between the holy soul which wants to connect with God, but the body says, you want to use me as a vessel? No way. I like food, or I like my feeling of independence, or I like philosophizing and ideas, right? I don't want to use my brain to subjugate the brain even to serve God, right? So you have a battle. That means they had the spiritual thing, but the physical, one of the three physical, relatively physical souls got out of control. That's what's going on here. The problem with the fourth exile is not that the spiritual soul gets out of control. The problem is, just like the chazir, just like the pig, where the outside is good, but it's the inside which goes bad. It's not that any of the three souls or the fourth soul got too strong, too big for its own boot, so to speak. The problem is the fourth soul goes to sleep. That means we start forgetting who we are at the root. We never had this problem before. The Jewish people throughout the generations, we always knew we're Jewish, our purpose is to connect with God, but you've got being pulled by your desires this way, that way, right? The three souls pulling them away from the purpose. So that the spiritual soul had to dominate and bash the three souls into place to make them constricted and channeled to be subjugated to the spiritual commands of the spiritual soul. Right, that's very good, because we had the spiritual soul was strong. That's the idea of the chewing the cud, the internal sign of purity. It's just the external signs were not there. So you have to bash out the external signs. Whereas in Edom, the internal sign is the one which starts, which is not there. It has split hooves. That means, intellect, intellect's how it should be. It's not got an extreme desire to just think about things for the sake of it. It's ready to be used in the right way. Same with emotions and the body. So in this exile, last nearly 2,000 years, the Jewish people, theoretically according to this, have been ready to do the right thing. We don't have an overbearing, irresistible desire for physicality or for philosophy or intellectual or arrogance, feeling of independence. We don't have that anymore. We fixed that. So what is the problem? The problem is we've forgotten who we are. Our emunah, our connection with God's gone. So we're getting confused. We feel lost now. This is much more scary. So there's a very nice metaphor which I came up with to illustrate this very nicely. Imagine you've got a car. It's got wheels, it's got the transmission which connects the engine with the wheels, right? And then you've got the engine itself, which is the powerful, the source of power in the car. And then you've got the person driving the car. So, person's driving the car, and then suddenly there's some problem with the transmission. It's not quite connecting the energy, the engine with the wheels. There's some sort of problem with the transmission there. And you take it to the mechanic, you tune it up, everything's flowing together nicely now, right? That's Bovel, that's the Babylonian one, that's the bridge between the physical and the intellectual, spiritual, right? So that's fixed now, okay? Then you've got a problem with the wheels. You're driving, and then the wheels just don't grip the road properly because they're overinflated and they go their own way. So what you do is you take some of the air out, of that physical desire. Now we can drive the car again nicely. Okay, so these are really external problems. The fact is the root of the car is working properly. You can drive it. It's just when you've got the problem with the wheels, with that physical soul, it's very hard. The place where it has contact with the ground kind of gets the problems there in the physical element. Right, the place where it has contact with the physical world, that's the wheels. Now, okay, let's say you fixed your transmission, you fixed the wheels, but now you've got a much more serious problem. There's a problem with the engine. If the engine isn't working, or if the engine is just over-tuned, and like it just goes shooting off, and you just can't control the car at all, not because there's something external stopping it. It's the car itself is broken. Yeah, the engine is everything. Without the engine working properly, you essentially don't have a car, right? So this is the idea of the Greeks, the idea of the intellect, the energy source of the whole body, the thing which directs the body, which is the mind, gets too big for its own boots. So once you fix the engine, then what's left? The car's perfectly fine. You've got a perfect, nicely smooth working car. Everything works brilliantly. It touches the ground properly. The transmission is smooth. The engine's working, purring beautifully. What can go wrong now? You've got a good car. What can go wrong with it? The problem is the driver falling asleep at the wheel. And it doesn't matter how good your car is. If the driver falls asleep at the wheel, that is the biggest danger. That is going to be inevitable crash. At least when the person's got the big wheels or whatever, he can kind of try to control the car and maybe survive it. Yeah. If he falls asleep, there's no hope. What can he do to control his? He can force himself to stay awake. But right. But what happens once he's fallen asleep? What do he do then? How do you fix that? That's why this exile is so long, thousands of years, because we've got to essentially wake ourselves up. But how do you do that? Yeah, there's a famous philosophical question in the Talmud. Yeah, how do the Jewish people get out of this exile? We have to create our own connection with God, because that's the thing which we're losing now. We're losing our faith in God. That's what's happened in the last 2,000 years. Yes, you can see it started with Christianity. Maybe my own observation. As if Paul, the religion of Edom, of this exile, was actually created by Jews. Is a perversion of our connection with God, and it got worse and worse. Right, until unfortunately the last century or two, where unfortunately, you know what's happening with the Jewish people, with all these different new movements coming up, all different ideas, and they're forgetting what defines a Jew. No, a Jew is the land of Israel. That makes a Jew. No, Judaism means Jewish culture. No, the Jewish language. This, that. We're forgetting the basics. Being a Jew means you are the ones who have the job to bring God into the world. That's all a Jew is. That's all we're meant to be doing. And that's the emunah, the faith, the connection with God, which we have. And it's falling asleep. And the more that the exile goes on, the worse it gets. And you don't have to say what the situation of the Jewish people is now. I don't want to say it. It's tragic. Tragic. So many Jews don't even know they're Jewish. They don't even know what Judaism is. The assimilation rate is through the roof. People are forgetting what it means to be a Jew. But thankfully, it seems it's all turning around in the last few weeks. Thank God. So many Jews who who've never kept anything in their life, they're completely non-observant, suddenly out of nowhere they're saying, "Oh, I want to wear tefillin now. Please get me some tzitzis." They want to start keeping the commandments. So we're talking about Jews who literally kept nothing. Well, maybe they might have kept the high holidays at Yom Kippur. Maybe, don't know. But someone who never wore tefillin, Jewish people have to wear phylacteries every day. Jewish men above the age of 13, we're meant to be wearing these things, these boxes with the scrolls reminding us of God's commandments, and He's taking us out of Egypt and choosing us as a nation to be to discipline our minds and our hearts to serve him, not to just go in the ways where our minds and hearts just take us. We've got to subjugate them to God's will. The idea of the binding, like we're tying ourselves to God's will. So, and this is a very, very basic commandment. Any Orthodox Jew is basic. And we've got people who have never done this before, and they're asking for it. It's a wonderful thing to see. Baruch Hashem, thank God. It's very encouraging. It's a shame it had to happen through such a tragic course of events. But anyway, so we see somehow the Jewish people are able very slowly to recreate their own emunah, recreate their own connection with God. Exactly how it happens can happen through many ways. But if you remember the idea of we spoke about in our Keystone lectures, the idea of Gilu Yichud, that the good comes from the bad, is a higher form of good. That means these people who have gone through their lives without the feeling of connection with God, that itself is telling them what they're missing. Now I understand what I'm missing. Yeah, this world seems very attractive. Yeah, get lots of money, have a nice physical life, whatever. And then they realize, 1 minute, is this all there is? Okay, I won't think about it. Because remember, at that stage, there's no one to think about it. The Jewish soul's gone, it's asleep. So they can't think about it. But when they have a wake-up call, they say, 1 minute, I actually feel there's something missing. What is it? I'm missing something. I can't put my finger on it. I think, these people, these Arabs or whoever it is, the Christians through previous centuries, what are they doing? Why are they attacking us? Anti-Semitism. That's because I'm a Jew. What does it mean to be a Jew? So that the suffering which the Jews go through awakens them to recreate that connection with God. And that's how you get out of it. We recreate our connection, right? Or the Orthodox people, they recreate that connection by actually keeping the commandments. That brings the light into them. But the ones who don't know of the commandments, it has to be done from an external way. It's the beauty of the whole thing. So now we have these 4 exiles corresponding to the 3 parts of the car, and you've got the driver himself. And we see they're fundamentally different. The first 3 exiles are the last one, which is 10 times longer than some of the other exiles. Yeah, so at 2,000 years, the longest exile was 180 years. So we're talking about complete categorically different type of exile here. It's the exile of everything seems to be good on the surface, but on the inside it's corrupt. That's the idea of the nations which we're in. It's the idea of hypocrisy. They give the facade of goodness. I would say this, I don't want to be too controversial for people who are in that religion, but I'll say it because you can shout at me in the comments. This religion is the facade of Judaism. They look at the so-called Messianic Jews, for example, the missionaries which try to convert Jews. What do they say? Look, you want to be a real Jew. It's not like we're this religion, that religion. They take the Torah, they take the idea of the Jewish connection with God, and they usurp it. And they say, this is real Judaism. Look, split hooves. Pig. I'm kosher. Look on the outside. Don't look too deep though. Don't look at where the validity and the veracity of our claims that we're the new Jewish people, or this religion is the real Judaism, the real connection with God. Don't look at it too close, because you'll see we don't chew the cud. But look at the outside. The split hooves are there. We're kosher. And that's the difficulty in this exile. It's very, very hard. It's very misleading. It's much more dangerous. Someone who is clearly evil with someone who seems to be good but is evil on the inside. And you see this. Remember, there are two elements to Esau. There are good members of Esau as well. You see this clash in America very strongly now. The good people of Esau and the evil of Esau. The evil of Esau is the facade. Don't look at the internals. Yeah, we have laws. But what are the laws? Well, if someone commits a crime, we'll let them out on bail, cash-free bail. Okay? What if someone defends themselves against one of these criminals? Oh, you killed him? You injured him? You can't do that. Justice. It sounds a lot like the people of Sodom. It almost sounds exactly like them. It's like literally in certain cities in America now. It's a living example of Sodom. It's the idea of hypocrisy. It's the idea. I'll finish off with a nice anecdote which is brought in the Medrash when describing the exile of Edom. It speaks about a judge in the times of Edom. Okay, whether it really happened or not is irrelevant. It's the idea which we're meant to focus on. And he was in his courtroom, and he had several cases which came in front of him. He sentenced one person to death for being a murderer. Then another person came, as an adulterer, sentenced him to death. And there was someone who was practicing witchcraft. They sentenced him to death, or her to death, whoever it may be. Then as they were being led out to be killed for this terrible crime, murder, adultery, or witchcraft, he actually, he said to his clerk next to him with a wink, yeah, you know what? I actually did all these 3 things just last night. What's going on here? It's the idea of the facade. Just like Esau, their ancestor. Yeah? He went to Isaac in his best clothes, yeah? And he started talking with his father in topics of Torah learning, very abstract ideas, very strange, to show, Isaac's thinking, wow, Esau, my son, he's really particular on keeping the commandments or doing the right thing, right? But it was all a facade. He had the facade of honoring his father. Why did Esau honor his father? Because we're human beings. You must honor your father. That's just basic decency. Yes, the idea of gratitude. I wouldn't be here without my father. We have to honor the father. But what did he actually do when Isaac actually gave the blessings to Jacob instead of to him? He wasn't happy about it. So he's thinking, I can't kill Jacob now because my father's still alive. So I can't wait till Isaac dies. Isaac, his father, dies. He was thinking that, what sort of... You're the paradigm of honoring parents. But yet, you're hoping that he's hoping that his father dies as soon as possible so he can go and kill Jacob without upsetting his father. What a corrupt way of thinking. This is an archetype of hypocrisy. That's the idea of, on the surface, I have to honor my father. But deep down, he doesn't care about his father. It's amazing. Yeah? And this is the story about the son of one of the princes and the Jewish people. When he served his father, yeah, he said, my respect for my father is nothing like Esau's. Yeah, when Esau was in the field, he wore his regular clothes. When he came to serve his father, he changed into his special clothes because he's serving the father. You've got to do it with the royal clothes, whatever. Whereas when I go out in the public, I wear my princely clothes. But when I come home and I serve my father, I'm in my casual clothes. Yeah, I don't change into them specifically. So the question is, why didn't you do that then? You're praising Esau so much that he's such a wonderful keeper of the laws of honoring parents. So why don't you do it then? Because he understood that if I would do that, it would be an external trapping. It would be misleading. That's not who I am, right? I'm not on that level of understanding that, oh, I've got to change my clothes to honor my father, right? That's superficial. The honor of the father has to be inside. You have to respect the father inside, and that should hopefully come out naturally in actions and in the way you talk to the father. Whereas Esau, he was doing it only superficially. He didn't care about his father. He was rotten on the inside. But he wanted to project this external facade of being good. Just like the judge. Justice. What a terrible person. You're a murderer. Death penalty. Well, he did it himself the last night. All three sins. Right? And you have these towns in America, like we're saying, you have to have justice, democracy, all these words they keep saying, which theoretically, if they'd keep to those words, we should be in a wonderful society. But yet, deep down, you can see by their actions that they don't really care about it. They don't really care about the society. They don't mind the society suffering as long as they have their power. And you have the good Americans, the ones who don't necessarily fight back and kill people just because things are not going their way. Okay, there's a question about that in itself. Is that the right way to do it? If there's an existential threat to everything, yeah, but they try taking the moral high ground. Try being good people. Yeah, you're calling us racist? No, well. You're calling us fascists, you're evil. So we're not going to go down to that sort of fighting match, fighting of words, name calling. We're just going to be good people, which is what Esau's meant to do. Esau is one who's meant to do the right thing. So these good non-Jews who are in the countries of Esau, they do the right thing. They don't deceive. They're actually good people. So that's the idea of the correction from the non-Jewish point of view. From the Jewish point of view, we've got to stop doing things superficially. We've got to connect with Hashem. If you look at a Jew nowadays, well, Orthodox Jew even, right? You've got the long beard, you've got the skull cap, you've got the white shirt. Yeah, look very Orthodox. But deep down, when we're walking on the street, yeah, are we looking at things we shouldn't be looking at? Yeah, when we're in private, what do we get up to? When we speak with people, you know, do we slander other people? Do we gossip about them? Yeah, these are the hidden things which we can... But no, but of course, I put my phylacteries on every day. I keep the Shabbos, I keep kosher. All the external trappings are there. That's no problem. For the Orthodox Jews I'm talking about. But what's missing? Is there something there below the surface which is missing? Everyone has to know. Everyone has to know. I'm not saying that this does happen amongst Jewish people. I'm not going to cast aspersions. I'm just saying there has to be some soul searching. Everyone's got some sort of issue. And that issue is going to take the form with most people as doing things externally, but losing the internal, right? Do we do the mitzvahs, but we forget who we're doing them for? Why are we doing it? We're trying to connect with Hashem. We're trying to bring Hashem into this world. We're trying to mimic Hashem. We're trying to be like Hashem. We want to be givers, not because it's the right thing to do. We want to be givers because that's what God is. God gives us this example. He's kind. So we've got to be kind. We've got to do the right thing. God teaches Torah to us. Yeah, His knowledge, His ethics, the morals which He wants for the world. So we've got to teach that to Jews, and ultimately non-Jews as well we have to sort of expose the world to as well, to help them as well. So this is the battle of Esau and Edom, the fourth exile. Right, so to summarize, we spoke about the Jewish people have the four souls, and all these four souls have some aspect of negativity in them, either with the three lower souls of physical, emotional, or intellectual. They become too powerful for the spiritual soul to control and to channel its divine light through the mind, through the emotions, through the actions, through the physical body. And the fourth exile corresponds to the idea of the soul itself, the spiritual soul, the holy soul goes to sleep, and we have to awaken it. And that corresponds, and that's the idea of the external souls all being good, the external souls, or the split hooves of the pig, but the idea of the spiritual soul goes to sleep. That means it's the internal soul which has the defect. That's the idea of not being able to chew the cud. The pig's not chewing the cud. And let's finish off with a very encouraging what the rabbis bring in the Midrash. It says at the end, the pig is going to be kosher. Right? So whether this actually means we're going to be able to eat pig, but what does it really mean? It means this pig, Esau, the Edom, the idea of superficiality, where you don't have the spirituality trying to guide it, right? And by default, what's going to happen? People are going to be hedonistic. They're going to be arrogant. They're going to be atheistic because of their philosophies, because there's nothing guiding it anymore. But once we reignite that light, then the physical trappings, the externals become good. That's the idea of the Western democracy and the Western society becoming good and holy. They become kosher. Because now they've got the combination of the trappings of a moral, ethical society, but then they'll have also that inner light, which gives them the meaning and the purpose of a good external physical world. Right? You won't have that hypocrisy anymore, because why do we create a nice physical world? Is because we want it to be a place where God can be revealed in the world. Okay, and let's hope that we see this very soon. And of course, the same thing goes with Yishmael, the fifth of the exiles. Yeah, is Yishmael, which is also happening around now. It says at the end of the exile of Edom, of Esau, there will be a smaller exile, a shorter time period exile of Yishmael, of the Arabs, which is Islam. And also they've got their the idea to fix as well. Might go into that in a different one. Exactly where does it fit in? Basically, it's the idea of we're getting the Persian exile again with the Muslims. We see interesting that Iran is actually the main antagonist to the Jewish people now. And they're an Islamic country, but they're Persian as well. So it's an interesting reconnection of that. So it seems that we have to be fixing the top from the Western world, and we have to be fixing the lowest soul again to some extent from the side of the Arabian or the Yishmael exile. Okay, thanks for listening, and hopefully we'll speak more in depth about the third of the four exiles. One corresponds to the mind, which is the exile of Greece. Next time, which is the story of the Hanukkah story, which we are celebrating now. So happy Hanukkah to everyone, and let's get rid of any hypocrisy and do things for the right reasons, not just for show. Okay, thanks for watching. All the best.